Okay, greetings, do-it-yourselfer, old motorboat owning YouTube community. This is my Mercruiser 470. It's roughly 1983, I think. There's the badge. You can figure that out if you want. But I think it's about an 82 or an 83. Runs great, but it's really, really hard to start. So I suspect, well, due to all the symptoms, I suspect it's a fuel pump issue. There is the old fuel pump. This is the inlet from the fuel filter, outlet to the, that's the outlet to the carburetor. And then this is the fuel overflow line back here. So if the diaphragm bursts, the carburetor will just suck gasoline up into the carb and then I think flood it out. And I think that's just supposed to be an indicator. A lot of people use clear tubing back here. Anyway, it's really, really hard to find a fuel pump for the 470, of course, because Mercruiser had this idea of making their own block for a while. So I searched and searched and searched. Nobody had it until I found one on Amazon, right? And so here's the one I found on Amazon. It looks very, very similar. But the big question that comes up is, you know, is the filter point up or does the filter point down, or does it open up or open down, or face up or face down? It's very, very unclear. This particular one says if your filter cup faces down. What does that mean? I don't know. But if I orient it like this, the flange is in the right orientation, right? The flange is correct. So I think the way this one is supposed to be mounted is filter above the pump, right? I think that's a lot easier than saying which way does it point. I don't know what does point mean related to a filter. Filters don't point. So this is filter above the pump. The original one, filter above the pump. The flange is the correct orientation, right? Truth will tell, when I take the old one off, does the push rod kind of point up and away? Or does it point down and away? If it points up and away, we're good. This one will work. This is how it actually. Let's see if I can move my hand the right way here. So that's the way it goes. So hopefully the push rod pushes on it like this. Some comments about this particular pump as it came from Amazon. It didn't come with the fittings. It came with the barb fitting for that overflow. Or no, where's the barb? Yeah, this one here. That's for the fuel overflow if the diaphragm breaks, because this is the kind of piston side and this is the fuel side up here. It did not come with either the fittings for the fuel in or fuel out, so I had to pump it a few times and figure out which is suction, which is delivery pressure. And then it's 1/8 inch NPT threads, and then I got 1/8 inch NPT to 1/4 inch barb. Both fittings, those are just from the hardware store for a few bucks. So, it also did not come with a gasket, right? And obviously I can't reuse a 30-year-old gasket, 40-year-old gasket. So I'm going to have to, I bought a sheet of gasket material, so let's go make a gasket for this thing. We'll crack it open and see what we've got. All right, so as I mentioned, the pump didn't come with a gasket. And I think, I mean, again, it's a Mercruiser specific pump, but I think they just kind of ripped. They use originally they used a Carter pump, which would also be on an early '80s Chevy small block. So I thought I could just go to the auto parts store and get an early '80s Chevy small block fuel pump gasket, but they didn't have it. Surprise, surprise. So I just got some filter stock, right? Just a sheet of nitrile felt filter stuff, and so that's. Rubber fiber sheet, I guess they call it, for fuel pump mounting. So there we go. So I think what I'll do is just measure this rectangle first. Measure this rectangle so I can at least get the filter around the follower here, and then I'll be able to work from there. Okay, so I just cut a rectangle out of there. You know, I cut a small piece, so basically that's how much gasket I needed. This is how much gasket came in the sheet. So it's kind of a waste of a bunch of gasket material. Maybe sell it on somewhere. It turns out it's like 17 by 44 millimeters, so I cut the rectangle out. Now I can trace it, against the flange, and then I should be able to get a pretty accurate gasket, cut some holes, and it should be good to go. Okay, so a couple attempts, and I was able to get the rectangle for the follower cut out, and so we put that in there. Getting the holes is going to be a little tricky because it's kind of deep on the other side. Hard to trace that, but I'll figure something out. Okay, I don't think I'm going to win any international gasket awards, but I also don't think I'm going to leak any fuel. Actually, there's no fuel in there. What goes through there? Oil. Because remember, this goes inside this follower goes inside the crankcase, and so there's just a rod that goes, against the camshaft like this. I guess it looks more like this. All right, so this, the blade end rides on the camshaft, and then this end rides on this follower. All right, so this is all exposed to the camshaft, so this gets lubricated by the engine oil. And I guess really the thing about it doesn't get exposed to gasoline at all. It gets exposed to oil. So there we go. All right, so we're back at the the engine now. Just in case I drip a little gas out of there, I think the problem is I'm not getting fuel, but just in case I drip some, I might put some rags down there to collect any drips. Makes it easier to clean up, a little safer. We've got a fire extinguisher there. I also have a fire extinguisher right behind me, but I'm also going to turn this fuel shut-off valve. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now I've got the fuel shut off. To give you a lay of the land, that's the transom there, and engine, obviously the fuel line goes into there, and the fuel tank is under there. So now I can't get fuel into the filter or into the pump. Now let's get the fuel lines disconnected, get the pump off there, and we'll know if this is going to work or not. All right, so we got both fuel lines taken off. This comes from the fuel filter. The steel line here goes up to the carburetor, right up there. I was able to get the compression fitting off, so hopefully I can reuse that compression fitting. Put a new flange in there, of course, or a new ferrule. So now we got couple half-inch bolts holding this thing on, and the truth is going to come out to see if this pump, the new pump, fits the old. All right, there's a time in everybody's life where you just feel like the sea nymphs of good fortune have smiled upon you, and today might be that day for me. I think my camera's overheating or something, but they appear to be the same pump, so I'm going to start to get the old one in. Okay, so we experienced a small bit of success. Got the old pump off. I'm narrating the YouTube. That's my wife saying yes. Success. It's kind of rare around here. Got the old one off, right? And unfortunately, it seems to work. So maybe it wasn't a fuel. The filter was clean in there, but for whatever reason, so I'm going to still put the new one in. My big question is there's this comical series of fittings at a right angle, and then it looks like 1/8 inch to 1/4, and 1/4 to something else, and then something else to a barb. I don't know why they have that all going on. So do I use that, or do I just go to 1/4 inch fuel line instead of the 3/8 inch fuel line? And I'm tempted to stick with the 3/8 just because it is Coast Guard approved fuel line versus the stuff I got at the auto parts store is fuel injection fuel line, so it's rated for higher pressure. So I think maybe I'll just stick with the 3/8 and leave this pile of fittings on there. But anyway, I gotta get the gasket dope, put the gasket on here, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, I've gotta come clean a little bit here. In the beginning of the video, I said that there's a push rod that pushes on this follower here, and that's what actuates the pump, right? But it turns out that's not the case. Turns out there's actually I don't know if this is a balance shaft or what runs through there, but there's a cam up in here. if you can see that. Yeah, there's a cam up in there. And that's what actually rides on that follower there. So it's actually a lot easier than using that push rod. So that's the first bit of interesting news, right? So I lied to you before. First bit of bad news is this is the spot on the fuel pump. So if you remember, this is the fuel side up here, and this is the fuel side, and this is the pumping side here. And this line here, right? This is, so if the diaphragm up here breaks, then let's back up a little bit. So this is where all the action is, right? This is inlet and outlet. If the diaphragm breaks, then fuel can get from here down into here, and this attaches to a tube. It should attach to this tube here, and then that tube just simply runs up to here and goes in the side of the carburetor, right? So my guess is that what happens when the diaphragm breaks, the engine runs until the fuel gets sucked up into here, and it just dumps raw fuel in there and then floods out the carburetor and kills the engine. That way it contains all the gasoline and kills the engine all in one kind of clever little operation. But this tube that is stock on the engine is really little. I don't know what it is, but it's pretty darn small. And this is this huge barbed fitting here. Unfortunately, the barbed fitting, the wrench size here, it's smaller than a 7/16, but bigger than 3/8, which means 13/32. I've never even heard of that. Or it's metric, so it'd be 8 millimeters or something. But I'm going to gamble. I'm just going to leave this one on. I'm going to run to the hardware store and get some tubing that fits this barb. I might actually have some from bleeding my brakes, but I'll go take a look. And then that means I'll have to find a different fitting up here on this end. So the right angle barbed fitting. That might be a little tricky, but we'll see what we can do. All right, so I got this far in this first trip to the hardware store. I guess that's good news. All right, more soon. Okay, the shadows are getting long in the day. It's time for my first total hack, and that's right here. The reason being that, so remember, this is the emergency kind of flooding port on the fuel pump. So if the fuel escapes, if the fuel escapes the pump side of it, and it winds up down here. Okay, so again, if the diaphragm ruptures and fuel winds up down here, it comes out through this barb, right, and it goes through some tubing up into this little fitting here, this fitting, which goes into the side of the carburetor like this, right? The problem is this is 3/16, and that's 5/16, and so I come up with a stupid hardware store hack here to mate the tube. So if that's the worst thing that happens today, we'll call it a success anyway. All right, we're getting close. So I've got the gasket ready to go. Put a nice thin layer of the Permatex gasket dressing on there. And got some on the flange, or I guess the mounting point on the crankcase. So give that a few minutes to dry, put the new gasket on, and we'll give it a shot. Okay, well, there we are. The fuel pump is mounted back on the crankcase. Fuel lines are connected. The overflow line, or burst line, whatever that's called, is connected. I've got a lot of extra line on it right now, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. The proof will be in a few seconds here. Alright, wasn't exactly an easy start, but it's running. Who knows, I completely drained it of fuel, so maybe that's why, but we'll see.